Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this is the Quran Reloaded.
We're not kidding. For real, though. This is the
Yeah.
Quran Reloaded. Now you guys can stop being, I'm just curious, when's the Quran coming out? Or, alternatively, you're just pussies. You'll never do the Quran Reloaded. You can't see this, but I'm like fake typing a comment with my hands.
Yeah,
That's you guys.
Really, though, it did take a long time. We're trying to figure out how we're going to do it. We're looking for a theme song. We actually, at one point, found a theme song that was almost perfect. We asked for some revisions, and we have yet to hear back. So I don't know if that's ever going to materialize. By the way, we still need a correct theme song. We did alter this one at the end a bit for this. But still, we need a Quran Reloaded theme song. So feel free to do that if you're competent in music skills.
So there's a few things that we have to go through real quick before we do the Quran itself, because not a lot of people, including ourselves, are terribly familiar with what that means. The Quran is not like the Bible. It is, but it isn't. And it's very weird to kind of think of it, because the Bible is everything. It's start to finish. It's the whole religion. The Quran is only a main, like the central hub of the religion as far as holy texts are concerned. And on top of that, it assumes that you are familiar with the Jewish and the Christian texts, like the major narratives, like Adam and Eve, Noah, all that stuff, Jesus, except not the divinity of Jesus necessarily, but his status as a prophet. So if you haven't seen our Bible study, if this is your first thing ever, it's probably important before you get really deep into the Quran to go to our Bible study and get some of the main points. Even though we're not like this serious breakdown, it's a comedy show, we get it, but you're still going to want to know a lot of the stuff that we're talking about.
Early on, they reference like the whole Adam and Eve story very briefly. I mean, they talk about it more, and they sprinkle stuff all throughout the whole book, but early on, they're referencing things, and obviously, pop culturally speaking, you know Adam and Eve, but I'm just saying that's
you
one
don't know
thing.
It the way we went through it, or the way that they know it. Also, additionally, there's a thing called Hadith, or things called Hadith, and these are basically things that the Prophet Muhammad had said concerning a smattering of different issues, and those are considered holy texts that you use to supplement the stuff in the Quran, or it's how they get Sharia, actually, as they work with the Quran and the Hadith, and then the people authenticate them, basically, like clerics and stuff, and they have different levels to which a Hadith is legitimate, all the way from authentic to not, which is weak. And then some groups like use them and some don't. Like Sunni Shia, their main contention is the differences in Hadith, and then like Quranists reject them outright. So we're not going to touch the Hadith, really. We might reference it from time to time, but it's kind of like when we reference the King James and the Bible Reloaded. While the wording may be different and you might need stuff to supplement it, sometimes we'll add that. But this is not the Hadith Reloaded. This is the Quran Reloaded. So we're not going to do that. And I know that if you're a Muslim and you came here to bitch at us, you're going to be like, well, you're not getting the whole story, blah, blah, blah. You're correct. But your religion's still incorrect. So that's fine. Like we're just gonna trudge through the Quran.
Yeah, it's gonna be a rough trudge. It's kind of like that depression swamp from Neverending Story 1 that the horse sunk into because apparently the horse needed Xanax. It's like that, but more brown people. Actually, no, there was a brown person there. It was an Indian.
His name he was a brown person. Yeah, Atreyu.
Yeah. Atreyu!
Also a shitty band.
Also, briefly, before we get this complaint, and then I swear we will begin, because I know this is sort of a big intro, but it kind of needs to be.
It does.
There are Muslims, many of which argue that you can't really get the true spirit of the Quran unless you read it in the original Arabic. And I'll give the Quran this. I'll give it this. As opposed to the Bible, which has had about 1 million different translations and it's been messed with a lot, the original Arabic is pretty close to how it originally was. However, I would also say, if it is a holy book, and I've said this about the Bible too, if it is actually holy, as long as it's translated relatively competently, that should still carry over. And if it doesn't, then maybe it's just a fucking book.
I'd like to point out that Shia Muslims, you spell your name like Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. So from now on, every time I hear Sunni versus Shia, I'm going to assume that it's a bunch of Muslims fighting single-handedly Shia LaBeouf.
So, with all that out of the way, here we go. In the Quran, the first surah, the opening. By the way, instead of chapters, they're called suras. I'll try and call them suras, but I guarantee at some point I'm going to fall into calling them chapters. But just so you know, the accurate term is sura. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful. By the way, of course, in the original it would be Allah, not God. Allah being the Arabic name for God. Because being translated to English, it is just God. But Allah, you get it.
Moving forward, if we did it means this in Arabic, or they would say this in Arabic, we would sit here forever on one verse. So we're not going to do that terribly.
Praise be to God, Lord of the worlds, the most gracious, the most merciful. That's good, at least they're starting with merciful. They're about to undo that entirely, and the image is going to go back to sort of the Old Testament bullshit angry God, but at the very least, they put their best foot forward.
Also, Lord of the worlds, which means that if Islam is one thing, it's planetary inclusionary, so it's not just Earth, it's also probably Pluto. I mean, the Quran seems like they would vote for Pluto.
It says worlds, not dwarf worlds. Neil deGrasse Tyson explicitly left Pluto out so they couldn't be included in Islam. Fact. Master of the Day of Judgment. See, now they've backpedaled a little bit. Master of the Day of Judgment. Well, a cool title is a little bit domineering.
It's a tiny bit. It kind of sounds like he's in, Allah is kind of in leather, like a leather suit with like a zipper mouth.
Oh, I could see that. Well, no, because isn't that what the sub does? He's more of a dom, so he'd be the one who's whipping the person in the zipper suit.
Like he's a switch. It's fine.
It is you we worship, and upon you we call for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those you have blessed, not of those against whom there is anger, nor of those who are misguided. So that's the opening, and it's called the opening, literally. If you had like a cover letter, that's what this is. That's the Quran's mission statement. I'd also like to think they made it up and did a lot of Googling on resume sites like I do. But I don't know, I think mine sounds a little more professional. Mine at least includes worked at fast food restaurant for 3 years. The Quran doesn't even have that. As far as I know, this is just a dirty desert man.
It seems like maybe, like, I know this was like their mission statement, like their first paragraph or whatever, but aren't you supposed to get an attention getter at the beginning? Like a quote from someone, like Shakespeare?
What would Shakespeare say about the Quran?
Like, probably one of those vaguely racist things he said about brown people.
Alright, so now we're going on to second surah, known as the Heifer or the Cow. Again, it's translation. So, you get it. Someone of a bovine persuasion. It begins, interestingly enough, with Alif, Lam, Mim, which are literally just letters, so it's sort of like an acronym or something. But the thing is, I went to go look up what this means. No one knows what it stands for. Jake is of the impression that he thinks it's some sort of organizational thing.
It seems like a Dewey Decimal sort of thing. However, as Hugo will point out in just a second, it's not on every single one of the surahs. It's only on random ones, it seems, or lightly connected ones.
Not totally sure, but more interesting than that, I went on a forum, and it was actually a Muslim forum when I was looking this up, because I kind of wanted to see what actual Muslims thought about this. And the answers were hilariously depressing. One of the most prevalent answers was, we shouldn't worry about it. Really? It opens up the body of your holy book. Shouldn't you kind of care? What if it's like an important message? Like, hey, don't bomb people. Like, that'd be important for some Muslims to know. Or like, hey, airplanes are for travel. Whatever. That's all I have to say about that.
Alif Lam Mim. Don't 9/11.
This is the book in which there is no doubt a guide for the righteous.
Well, I'm sold. That's all you had to say. If the Bible would have just said, this is the only thing that is real, like, oh, well, you win.
See, that's what gets me, though. The Bible waited about, 7 chapters to try and be like, no, guys, really, you should believe us. This one, out of the gate, I'm like, oh, they're real confident. I believe in you. Those who believe in the unseen and perform the prayers and give from what we have provided for them. So it's for people who already believe in the unseen, so if you're not a supernatural believing person, I guess this book isn't for you. And those who believe in what was revealed to you and in what was revealed before you and are certain of the hereafter.
The hereafter being heaven or something. So if you're certain of that, Islam is for you.
Actually, it's kind of interesting how from Judaism all the way to Islam you have the different beliefs as far as heaven and hell go, because as we've talked about on the Bible Reloaded, Jews aren't all about that hell noise, and some of them are iffy on heaven. That's a debate that they still have. Christianity, obviously, heaven and hell is a thing. And it also is in Islam, but the difference being that in Islam there is no original sin, because Jesus also isn't a savior type deal.
Right.
They actually talk about in a couple pages, I don't know if we're going to get to it today, probably not, but Adam still does the thing, but God forgives him, so there's no original sin. So the way you get to heaven is, again, by following the rules of the Quran and kind of, vaguely speaking, being a good person. Muslims would more define it as obeying the words of Allah, which is why, for instance, someone who is in ISIS can say, no, I'm still a good person and I'm going to heaven because I'm doing what Allah prescribes, which is killing people that aren't following what Allah prescribes as far as they're concerned. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, in like 3 pages is going to say, definitely behead journalists. Definitely. 2 definitelys.
These are upon guidance from their Lord. These are the successful. As for those who disbelieve it, ooh, us. Good, they're referencing us almost immediately. Good for you. Maybe Allah saw this. He's like, okay, someday 2 jackasses on the internet are going to have somewhat of an audience, and they're going to start reading this, so we need to reference them. Keeps us interested. It is the same for them, whether you have warned them or have not warned them, they do not believe. God has set a seal on their hearts, and on their hearing, and over their vision is a veil. They will have a severe torment.
Isn't that God's fault? It's not my fault. I'm not a Muslim. It's your goddamn fault.
It is, and this is interesting too. As far as many Muslims are concerned, there is no free will. Predestination is a thing, kind of like how Calvinists, if you followed Calvinism like strictly, so you're not going to have a Muslim, or at least not all Muslims, are certainly not going to tell you, well, people go to hell because free will. No, people go to hell because Allah wills it, because everything happens in accordance with His will. So, I don't know, it's interesting. We can't really have a free will argument because they don't think it's a thing.
It kind of takes that whole, is it just because God does it, or does God do it because it's just? In this scenario, you get an answer, it's just because God does it.
Yeah.
And that's the answer all the time. So that's why you get such hard line, well, yeah, but it's God, and this is the word, so I have to murder you, or I have to, do something that's not necessarily socially progressive.
Among the people are those who say, we believe in God and in the last day, but they are not believers. They seek to deceive God and those who believe Him, but they deceive none but themselves, though they are not aware. If they're not aware of a deception, is it really a deception?
Isn't that more of like a miscommunication?
I think so. It's more like they believe, but then God's like, I'm not really feeling it.
It's like God asked them, does this make me look fat? And they genuinely thought it didn't make them look fat, but it made them look fat.
In their hearts is sickness, and God has increased their sickness. They will have a painful punishment because of their denial.
This is okay. That's not cool, man.
And when it is said to them, do not make trouble on earth, they say, we are only reformers. In fact, they are the troublemakers, but they are not aware.
So basically this is just justifying every bad thing you ever do. As long as it's the name of Allah, you can just do your thing, man. It's fine, because the other people are the bad ones trying to stop you.
It's an interesting scapegoat. Christianity has this too, but it's interesting that it's so spelled out here that it basically gives any Muslim the justification that it's a no true Scotsman. It's a no true Scotsman written right into the Holy Book on the first page. It's literally them saying, okay, sometimes people who are Muslim will do bad things in the name of Islam, but they're not real Muslims. It's interesting.
For our detriment and to its benefit. It has the luxury, because it's a rather young religion, and as far as it's the youngest of the Abrahamic religions by far. It has the convenience of hindsight, seeing all the different ways religions fail.
Yeah.
And it also has the advantage of a much more clear vocabulary than they did in ancient times, because, obviously proto-languages and stuff like that are they're trudgy and kind of murky. This, you can be extremely explicit and you can get your point across immediately. As far as all the main religions, this is the one. A lot of atheists tend to say religion was just created to control and stuff. I don't buy that for Judaism and Christianity. I do buy that for Islam. Yeah. Especially when you read it like this. It doesn't come across as, this is what we believe. It comes across as, you will believe this.
And when it has been said to them, believe as the people have believed, they say, shall we believe as the fools have believed? In fact, it is they who are the fools, but they do not know. And when they come across those who believe, they say, we believe, but when they are alone with their devils, they say, we are with you, we are only ridiculing. I do that all the time. I go home and like when I'm out there, I'm like, no, I'm totally with you guys. And then when I come home, I'm like, ha ha ha, fuckers. Those are they who have bartered error for guidance, but their trade does not profit them, and they are not gilded.
Look at the Quran using like metaphors and stuff. I dig it. You don't get a lot of that in the Bible.
Oh my god, I'm so sick of the Old Testament. At least when we get to the New Testament, it gets closer to readable because, it was written at a much later date. And this was written even later, so it has the benefit of so many advances in human language. I mean, don't get me wrong, the message is still bullshit, but at least I'm not getting a headache. Their likeness is that of a person who kindled a fire when it illuminated all around him. God took away their light and left them in the darkness, unable to see.
But they have a Kindle Fire, so it doesn't matter. You don't need that. Kindle Fire is fine. It's got backlit.
Deaf, dumb, and blind, they will not return. Or, like a cloud burst from the sky in which there is darkness and thunder and lightning, they press their fingers into their ears from the thunderbolts in fear of death. But God surrounds the disbelievers. So basically, they're drawing a metaphor of the sticking your fingers in your ears and going, la 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 la, I can't hear you. Which is interesting. Again, what is it with religions and the projection? You ever notice that?
Yeah, they're like knocking on the door of self-awareness, and they're like, nah, no, that's not for me, that's not for me, that's for you. That's for you.
The lightning almost snatches their sight away whenever it illuminates for them. They walk in it, but when it grows dark over them, they stand still. Had God willed, he could have taken away their hearing and sight. God is capable of everything.
Except making them believe.
I think the point is that he could. It's just that he's kind of a cunt and is like, some people just nah. O people, worship your Lord, who created you and those before you, that you may attain piety. He who made the earth a habitat for you, and the sky a structure, and sends water down from the sky and brings out fruits thereby as a sustenance for you. Therefore, do not assign rivals to God well you know.
What about, the scientists who make meat in, a lab? Are they better? Because, let's be honest, steak or burgers are better than an apple.
And if you are in doubt about what we have revealed to our servant, then produce a chapter like these and call your witness apart from God if you are truthful.
So they're throwing the literary gauntlet down right now, right?
Basically, they're like, if you want to prove us wrong, bitch, write your own Quran. I mean, I probably could. I won't. But I mean, I have a computer too. It wouldn't even be hard. I don't have to write Sanskrit. I don't have to tan leather. I don't have to find quails and pluck feathers. I don't have to learn Sanskrit, because of course that's historically inaccurate for the period and they wouldn't have known it. But if you do not, and you will not, beware the fire whose fuel is people and stones, prepared for the disbelievers.
The fuel is people and stones? Only 50% of that is actually working. And I just think they have enough people to make the fire viable that they think the stones are also contributing, but really they're just warm stones. And I think it's important for us to stop at the very first point we get to something that we can really, really object to from the Quran, and this will happen quite often. So I'm not sure about you, but I'm going to say that this isn't necessarily the most peaceful book.
No.
That's ever been written. And also it's kind of full of itself. It's a little full of itself. So first impressions, if this is speed dating and I have to choose a holy text, I'm passing on this one, even though air women are kind of sexy. And I assume if the Quran was a woman, it would be bangable, but it's not a date. You don't date it. You just kind of one night stand it.
The Book of Mormon is the best for speed dating because I think Joseph Smith should be included, and he sounds like a sexy fellow. He went treasure hunting a lot. He had those divining rods. You probably get super, super in shape walking around all day bullshitting people.
Yeah, a lot like Muhammad is. Muhammad and Smith are pretty much the same person, except one's brown, and the other one was hunted by the American government.
Come back next week to find out which is which. So, thanks everyone. We'll of course be back. I don't know when we're gonna schedule these. It's not gonna be weekly like the Bible because
probably
we're gonna be
monthly
busy
at first until we get into some rhythm with it. But we're probably gonna supplement with response videos. We don't do response videos on the Bible Reloaded, but there's a lot of apologetics out there from Islam that's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, have you seen the one where the dude talks about drinking your dad's cum? That's
well,
gold.
you will see it if you haven't, because we're gonna do it.
You can always follow us on Twitter. I think we're still doing at Bible Reloaded and at Hugo Reloaded, right?
It's the same.
All right, it's the same.
So you can always subscribe to TQR and be one of the first in a long line of people that are going to see this channel flagged relentlessly by people that are just pissy. But it's fine. We're gonna trudge on. We're not gonna stop. It's gonna be great. We're gonna finish the Quran, and you should do that with us.
You can also donate to our Patreon campaign. It's the same as our Bible Reloaded one. They are linked. So if you already donated to the other one, don't donate to this one. But if you'd like to donate to this one, click that link, and it'll take you to our other thing. So until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this has been the Quran Reloaded. Next week, we make sure that they spell our names correctly on the fatwa.